All right, so you guys wanted a deep dive on Josep Roig Martín, and
Oh, yeah.
let me tell you, this one is a real head-scratcher.
Really?
We're working with excerpts from a Spanish-language true crime account, so piecing together, like, the truth from these fragments.
Oh, wow.
It's like solving a puzzle where, like, half the pieces are missing.
It's a case that's really interesting. It makes you wonder, was this guy a serial killer who just, got away with it? Or was he like a master manipulator? A real talented storyteller, but ultimately creating a false narrative.
So, okay, let's unpack what we do know.
Uh-huh.
Joseph was born in Baltimore back in '55, one of 6 kids.
Wow.
Growing up in a family just, like, riddled with poverty and neglect.
Oh, man.
His dad's alcoholism meant his mom was constantly working just to keep food on the table.
Yeah.
It got so bad that Joseph and his siblings ended up in foster care.
That's, sadly, that's a recurring theme in the histories of a lot of folks who end up committing violent crimes.
Right.
Doesn't excuse anything.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But understanding that context, it helps us to grasp,
Yeah.
the potential psychological factors at play here.
So how do we connect the dots between a tough upbringing
Yeah.
and, well, murder?
Well, think of it this way. Early childhood experiences, especially those involving like trauma and instability,
Yeah.
significantly impact brain development, particularly in areas that regulate like emotions and impulse control. The chronic stress of poverty, parental neglect, and the instability of foster care. I mean, these things can create a sort of vulnerability, making it harder for individuals to cope with difficult situations in healthy ways later in life.
It's like their emotional foundation is shaky from the start.
Exactly. And in Joseph's case, his early trauma, it seemed to have manifested in a severe food addiction and obesity.
Wow.
Despite this, he manages to join the army at 18,
Wow.
serves in Germany,
Okay.
but then develops a drug addiction. So it's almost like he was constantly seeking ways to numb the pain of his past. Yeah, escape.
So we're already seeing like a pattern.
Yeah.
Impulsivity and difficulty coping with stress.
Yes. And unfortunately, things get much darker from here. Joseph eventually marries and has a son, but his wife, who also struggled with addiction, abandons him
Oh, wow.
and takes their child. And according to the account, this event becomes a major catalyst for his downward spiral, fueling this consuming rage and desire for revenge.
Now, you'd think losing your wife and child would send anybody into a tailspin.
Right.
But what makes some people lash out violently while others facing similar situations find healthy ways to cope?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But one theory that might apply here is the cycle of violence. Children who grow up witnessing or experiencing violence, especially within their own families, are statistically more likely to become perpetrators of violence themselves.
So it's like they're learning that violence is an acceptable way to solve problems or express emotions.
Exactly. It becomes a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior. And then you add in Joseph's existing issues with impulse control and emotional regulation, combined with the intense rage and feelings of betrayal stemming from his wife's abandonment. I mean, it creates a very volatile mix.
And that volatility explodes outwards when, while he's searching for his wife, he encounters 2 homeless individuals and just kills them in a fit of rage. It's like he's projecting his anger and frustration onto these innocent people.
It's a very chilling observation. It suggests a level of like displaced aggression where he's taking out his anger on easy targets who can't fight back.
Right.
This lack of empathy and disregard for human life is a hallmark of antisocial personality disorder, which is something we might want to consider when analyzing Joseph's overall behavior.
So, wait, are we saying he might have been a sociopath?
It's too early to say for sure, but it's certainly a possibility worth exploring.
Yeah.
Individuals with this disorder often exhibit a lack of remorse, a disregard for social norms and the rights of others, and a tendency to engage in impulsive and reckless behavior.
And unfortunately, the violence doesn't stop there. He goes on to kill 2 more people that same night. A woman he tries to question about his wife's whereabouts, and a bystander who just happened to witness the crime.
Right, and these additional murders, they seem to suggest that the initial killings weren't just a one-off act of impulsive rage.
Yeah.
This is a sign of something much more sinister brewing beneath the surface.
It's a brutal spree for sure. But then there's this weird detail, like Josep actually tried to conceal the bodies, tried to clean the crime scenes. Does that contradict this whole sociopath theory? I mean, it doesn't sound like a guy without remorse. Right?
Yeah, that's where things get complicated. You see, while a lack of remorse is often associated with sociopathy,
Right.
it's not always like a clear-cut indicator.
Okay.
It's possible that he was experiencing some level of guilt or shame, even if it was fleeting.
So maybe he understood, like, what he did was wrong.
Right.
Even if he couldn't fully grasp the emotional consequences.
Exactly. Or it's possible he was just trying to avoid getting caught.
Right.
I mean, remember, we're dealing with someone who's already shown us he can be manipulative.
Okay, so after 18 months in jail for these murders, though he's later released due to lack of evidence, Josep ends up going back to his old job at a pallet factory. And his boss, maybe feeling bad for him, lets him live in a trailer on the property.
And that right there, the isolation of that factory setting,
Yeah.
becomes a crucial turning point in our story. It's almost like it provided a breeding ground for his darker impulses to fester and grow.
So fast forward to November 1996. Josep murders Kimberly Line Spicer after she rejects his advances, buries her body on the factory grounds. But here's where the story takes a real disturbing, frankly unbelievable twist.
This is where we enter the realm of the truly macabre. Josep claimed to have not only murdered Spicer, but to have, dismembered her body,
Oh my God.
mixed her flesh with beef and pork, and sold it as hamburgers from a roadside stand.
Okay, hold on a second. Even for someone capable of murder, isn't that a bit far-fetched?
Right.
I mean, logistically speaking, how would someone even pull that off?
You're right to question that. From a practical standpoint, it's highly improbable. The amount of meat you would need to run a hamburger stand, the disposal of the remaining, evidence,
the
health risks, not to mention, someone would have to notice something off about the taste. It just doesn't add up.
So what are we supposed to make of this confession? Was he just trying to, shock the authorities? Or create a more sensationalized version of himself?
That's certainly one possibility. Some individuals, particularly those with narcissistic tendencies, they crave attention and notoriety, even if it's coming from, negative actions.
Yeah.
Confessing to something so outlandish could have been a way for him to, inflate his own sense of importance, to become, more than just a regular murderer.
It's like he wants to be the star of his own gruesome horror movie.
Precisely. But there's another possibility we need to consider.
Yeah.
The possibility that he was deliberately misleading investigators to create a distraction or even plant seeds of doubt.
So you're saying this whole hamburger thing could have been a calculated strategy to throw off the investigation?
It's not uncommon. Criminals, especially those who are intelligent and manipulative,
Right.
they engage in these deceptive tactics. By confessing to something so outrageous, Josep might have been hoping to create a sense of disbelief, this can't possibly be true reaction, right? And that might lead investigators to focus on, proving or disproving that particular claim and potentially overlook other clues or evidence.
And just when you think the story couldn't get any wilder, December 1996, the attempted murder of Rita Camper. Thankfully, she manages to escape from the trailer and alert the authorities. That's a close one.
Rita Camper's escape is a pivotal moment in this case. It's not just that her bravery saves her own life, but it also exposes Josep's crimes and prevents further harm. Her testimony leads the police straight to the pallet factory where they uncover Spicer's body, confirming at least one of Josep's heinous acts.
It's like something out of a nightmare, but thankfully this time, the victim fights back, and it's her courage that brings Josep down.
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of empowering victims
Yes.
and believing their stories. Often victims of violence, especially those who've been through traumatic experiences,
Right.
they may be reluctant to come forward, or they may not be believed when they do.
Yeah.
Rita Camper's story is a powerful reminder that we must always listen to and support survivors of abuse.
Okay, so with Spicer's body found, Josep is back in custody. This time, under interrogation, he starts confessing to a whole string of other murders, including one that is corroborated by the source material, the murder of Katie in Magazine. Her body was found in a shallow grave, just as he described.
And here's where the puzzle gets even more complex.
Yeah.
The discovery of Katie and Magazine's remains,
Yeah.
it seems to lend some credence to his confessions.
Yeah.
But investigators could never find any evidence to support his claims about the other victims.
So are we dealing with a case of, selective honesty Was he telling the truth about some murders while fabricating others to enhance his notoriety? What could possibly motivate someone to falsely confess to such horrible crimes?
That's a question that has fascinated criminologists for decades.
Yeah.
False confessions, especially those involving high-profile or particularly gruesome crimes.
Yeah.
They can stem from a very complex interplay of factors. In some cases, individuals might confess due to a desire for attention or notoriety, a warped sense of guilt, or even like a subconscious need to be punished.
Could it also be a way of, like, exerting a twisted sense of control? I mean, he's already admitted to some horrific acts, so maybe he figures, why not add a few more to the list? Make it even harder to really understand the extent of his crimes.
That's an interesting theory. By muddying the waters with these false confessions, he could be attempting to retain some semblance of power over the narrative, to create a legacy shrouded in mystery and ambiguity. It's almost like he's saying, you'll never truly know the full extent of what I've done.
It's a chilling thought. And unfortunately, we may never get definitive answers. Josep died in prison in 2017, taking his secrets, if there were any, to the grave.
And that's what makes this case so compelling, yet so frustrating. We're left with more questions than answers, a legacy of uncertainty that hangs over the entire narrative. Was Josep a prolific serial killer who skillfully evaded detection for years? Or was he a deeply disturbed individual who constructed this horrifying persona to mask his own insecurities and twisted desires?
It's like we're staring at a blurry photograph, trying to make out the details, but the image remains elusive. You know, I keep coming back to that detail about the hamburgers. Even if it was just made up, and it probably was. It just reveals this, like, disturbing level of depravity, you know? It's like he was trying to dehumanize his victims even further, make them seem less real, less worthy of empathy.
That's a really astute observation. I think it speaks to the power of language and storytelling, even in the context of criminal behavior. You know, by creating this horrific narrative, whether true or not, Josep was essentially trying to control how others perceived him and his actions.
So it wasn't just about committing the crimes, it was about shaping the story around those crimes.
Exactly. He wanted to be seen as something more than just a murderer. He wanted to be like a monster, a figure of legend, and in a way, he succeeded. I mean, even today, years after his death, we're still talking about him, trying to make sense of his motives and actions.
And that's where I think this deep dive gets really interesting. It's not just about solving a crime or uncovering the truth about a particular individual. It's about confronting our own anxieties about the world around us, about the hidden darkness that might exist just beneath the surface of everyday life.
I couldn't agree more. I think this case forces us to ask some uncomfortable questions about our own vulnerabilities, our trust in others, and the systems that we rely on to protect us.
And we also have to acknowledge that there are just some mysteries we may never fully solve, despite the investigations, despite Joseph's own, like, rambling confessions. We're left with this unsettling sense of ambiguity, you know, this doubt that just hangs over the whole case.
And that ambiguity, that lack of closure, it can be incredibly frustrating, even haunting, But it also serves as a really powerful reminder of the limits of our understanding, the complexities of human behavior, and the enduring power of evil to elude our grasp.
So what can we take away from this deep dive into the life and alleged crimes of Josep Roig Martín?
Well, I think it really underscores the importance of critical thinking, of not blindly accepting information at face value, especially when it comes to sensationalized accounts of crime and violence, you know? We have to be willing to question our assumptions, to look beyond the surface, and to seek a deeper understanding of the complexities of human motivation.
It also reminds us that evil isn't always something monstrous or easily recognizable. It can lurk in the shadows, disguised by ordinary appearances and everyday routines. And that's perhaps the most unsettling lesson of all.
Well said. It's a reminder to stay informed, to be vigilant, and to never underestimate the human capacity for both good and evil.
This has been a truly unsettling but fascinating deep dive. If you're intrigued by this case and want to learn more, I encourage you to do your own research. Explore the source material. Form your own conclusions about this truly enigmatic and disturbing figure.
Just maybe skip the hamburgers for a while.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, thanks for joining us on Deep Dive.